Hello, everybody. This is KeyFramesForgotten, a podcast where we talk about anime that you may not have thought about for a while. My name is Jane Michelle Alman,
and I'm Julian Mallerman.
And today we are taking a look at Speedgrapher, a nice counterpart to the last episode, the first episode, in more ways than one, because, whereas I think most people have at least heard of And Yet the Town Moves, I don't think very many people at all remember Speedgrapher. And they're opposites in other ways, too, as we'll get to. I did kind of want to open this episode with something of an apology, almost, which is not something I thought I would have to do this early, but kind of the core thesis of our program is like we want to put a spotlight on things that people have forgotten about, but maybe should remember. Whereas Speedgrapher, what would you say, Julian?
One moment. She's smiling because she's free! Her heart is filled with freedom!
Thanks. So, full disclosure, both Julian and I went into this giving it, the most earnest shot we possibly could. I think this show is kind of extremely bad. Yeah. I mean, if people remember this one at all, which I don't think very many people do, I went through my whole, analyst followers, which is not that many people, but it's enough, that it's a decent sample size, and only one other person had completed it, besides the two of us, and the director, Kunihisa Sugishima. If people know him, it's definitely not for this. It's for either the first season of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, which is a totally different beast than this entirely, or the first Strike Witches OVA, which is totally different from both of these things. The man has had an interesting career, as we'll kind of get to. But the other thing is that this aired on, at least in the United States, it aired on the Independent Film Channel's anime block, which they did have for a little while. It aired alongside Witchblade, Hellgirl, and a couple other things that not too many people remember. I think Hellgirl's probably the most well-remembered of those. And I have to imagine this is the worst of them by far. Not to be rude about it, but...
Yeah, here's the thing. I feel slightly more positively about it than Jane. And I'd still say it's maybe a 3 at best out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to do the whole number reductionism thing, but when something is this bad, you're kind of left wanting for other metrics. I haven't seen that many anime in the grand scheme of things. I've seen about 250 in my life. Of those, this is easily bottom 20 material. Maybe bottom 10. It's real bad. I mean, I don't want to just trash on it before we even explain what it is, but just I wanted to run out ahead of that
I wanted
full
to bury the lead. Gradually guide people through the story of how this got made, and then finally drop the fucking bomb.
Yeah, I
guess
that would be
kind of impossible.
It's not possible. No, this is I believe it's 2006 Gonzo production, and
2005.
Gonzo production, and Gonzo is one of those studios that has sort of a slightly infamous reputation. They have made good shows,
In fact,
but
great shows, even around this period.
Yeah, so that's secondhand information for me, but I have heard as much. This show, this has to, like, I have to imagine that this is the worst thing that they ever did. If it's not, then I have no idea what was going on over there.
I can imagine worse.
Yeah, but like I just wanted to run out ahead and be like, we genuinely really tried, and you're just gonna have to take our word for that to give this show like as fair an appraisal as we could. And I mean, I can't speak for Julian, but I fucking hate this show. I think just genuinely god awful on basically every level.
See, I can't say exactly that I despise the show, but I do think that it may be the worst show I've ever actually completed, excluding like things that I actually found entertainingly bad.
Yeah,
or
I mean,
like that had a basic understanding of what their deal was.
Yeah,
or like things that were so up their own ass that it like flew all the way around. Like Garzy's Wing is.
Yeah, that's kind of like the benchmark for like truly terrible anime.
But Garzy's Wing is really, really entertaining.
Garzy's Wing is like funny. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's actually enjoyably bad shit.
Yeah.
This is also bad shit, but
just it's not enjoyably also... so.
Yeah. We'll get into that.
Yeah, before we go any further, we should at least explain what the show is about.
Yeah.
The premise is not that out there as far as like, you know, like weird anime premises go. The gist is there's this war photographer named Saiga. He stumbles into this essentially a conspiracy by a group called the Roppongi Club, which I think they only ever actually use that name like twice in the whole show. But anyway, to how would you describe their goal? Take over Japan, basically.
Yeah, basically, the Roppongi Club is this sort of inside cadre with connections to, like, Sweet Tango. The sort of guy who's like the mastermind of a lot of this is the sort of second in command of one of the most powerful sort of corporations, like mega corporations in Japan after like this is in the equivalent to like the near future. Like,
yeah, I don't think they ever give us a year, but it's implied to take place like maybe like 30 or 40 years in the future.
So, given that this is from the early 2000s, it's like 20 years from now. That makes sense,
we're looking at like, 2040 roughly as far as a setting date. And the big thing is, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see that there's this brown-haired girl dead in the center of the poster. That is Kagura, and there is really not a delicate way to put this, has magic spit that can give people superpowers based around, they never straight up say they're sexual fetishes, but that's essentially the gist of things. And Saiga, being a war photographer, gets the ability to, when he takes pictures of things, they explode. And the whole of the show is basically him and Kagura being on the run from the group that Sweet Tango's boss owns, and I'm now forgetting her name. Give me a second.
Shinsen Tenozu.
Okay, yeah, Shinsen. That Shinsen owns.
Who is Kagura's mother.
Who is Kagura's extremely abusive mother. And if it is... The plot... We're not going to do a ton of recapping here, because the plot honestly isn't very important or even very coherent. It's
it starts out with like, the thing is, it starts out with like, there is way too much going on, but it's like, okay, this could be fun and trashy.
Yeah.
This is like just bizarre, but at the same time it feels like, you know, the build up to, you know, like a pretty solid sort of like if very tasteless action series.
The show I kept comparing it to while we were watching it, and I believe you've never seen this, but it kind of reminds me of Black Lagoon. If Black Lagoon, everybody had superpowers, and also it was directed like trash.
Yeah, like I've seen enough of Black Lagoon to understand this comparison.
I like Black Lagoon. I don't think I would call it like a great show or anything, but it is similar to this. They are from the same zeitgeist in like the mid to late 2000s of these like dark action shows that are there's two words that I hate describing anime with that I'm going to use during this episode, and the first of them is edgy. It's an extremely edgy series.
I mean, look, like it like one of the opening scenes, and it's actually like, well, we'll get to why these sort of things lose their potency as it goes on. But there's the whole bit with a very wealthy ballet dancer who it turns out is a superpowered assassin for the Roppongi Club and the Tenozu Corporation. Breaks a girl's arm because she has the temerity to try to audition for him as a student.
Yeah, that is the opening scene.
It is really well,
and
like the second
first time, the cold open with Saiga in the war. Is the actual first one, but
and I can't put this very delicately. Is he gets an erection while photographing a man being machine gunned?
Yeah, again, like
it's this. Okay,
it's a colossally tasteless show.
It is okay. Let me put it like this: it is, as I said fairly early on when we were watching it. It's basically an Aristocrats joke.
Yeah,
this show is an Aristocrats.
It's just like, pile as much tasteless gunk on top of itself as it possibly can, and it just keeps going and going and going. That scene that we were just talking about, where the ballet instructor literally breaks the girl's arm because he's, you know, just that's how these people are, is actually very, you know, upsetting. But the thing is, and this is a problem with the show in general, that's upsetting. By like the 20th time something like that happens, it's boring. And you get to that point, I would say not even quite halfway through the series, and the show is 24 episodes long, so it's just really like the whole series is just like a lot of like beating a dead horse, essentially. Just like the whole point of the show, it seems to just be, on a very basic level, like, rich people are evil, do you get it? Which is not a bad point for a show to make, and we can get into the minutiae of this a little bit later. But when the only reason you seem to think that is because of these, like, weird made-up scenarios where, like, you know, I mean, like, I'm just gonna say it, a lot of the scenes read as, like, bizarre, like, QAnon conspiracy theories.
Yes. It's like, albeit tailored for a specifically Japanese audience in ways we'll get into later.
Yeah, it's just, the whole experience of watching Speedgrapher is like having somebody, like, just dump, like, a 50-paragraph Reddit post on you about how Hillary Clinton is, like, locking, I don't know, alien children in cages and shipping them to Russia. It's just nonsense. like the whole show is just it's inane. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just it gets. Well, I mean, I definitely do.
Yeah.
So like this. Oh God, it's almost it becomes hard to talk about this show.
It does. This was a thing that I realized like halfway through the show. I'm like, this episode's gonna be challenging because the show is so itself that it's hard to compare it to much else.
Yeah,
like I did bring up Black Lagoon earlier, but Black Lagoon is like competent. Like, I don't even know how to explain to people just how poorly put together this show is. Like, on one level, like part of it is the production, which is extremely bad. The whole show just looks not good.
It's the problem is it'll switch between. Like, there will be moments where it'll look decent for like sections. But the problem is that those sections feel like they were directly handled by the episode director and don't necessarily have a consistent style.
Yeah, the thing that I attributed those to was either episode directors or maybe even just individual talented animators being like, I'm at least gonna make my part look good. Like, I don't know. The show it like large parts of it honestly look like they weren't corrected. Like, at any point.
Yeah, that's the big part.
And there's places where there's these weird animations where things will be like, it looks like they're animated on the wrong count. Like, things will happen more quickly than it seems like they should be, or more slowly. It's very strange. One of the reviews we saw compared it to an amateur production, and I honestly think that that's accurate.
Yeah, it like student animation, and like not, and it's like, you know, definitely like not like final project student animation.
No,
either. Like is, you know, like midterm, actually in the process of learning student animation. It's real wonky, and it's like, and then in amongst that, there will be some cuts that are actually really good, yet also often don't entirely go with the overall style of the show.
There will be like individual good cuts, or occasionally even whole scenes that look pretty good, but look like they're from another show entirely.
Yeah, and like some of the sequences, like which are better looking, do have a consistent style to them. Like,
so
this
I
is
wonder
what the show was supposed to look like, the prospectus, as it were. You know, but it's like, what the. Just so like, all right, so maybe it'll be like, and so for a while I was going to give this show the benefit of a doubt in that, like, with respect to the aristocrats joke thing, is that it might to some degree be a little bit satirical, and like it clearly is riffing on things which are. Like, like,
I do want to just cut in here just to make sure that this part is clear. The thing that I don't know if we entirely explained this, all of the bad guys are like people who have been superpowered by Kagura's spit, and there's like a whole mind control sub thing going on, so it's like the whole
that's never explained.
They actually never really touch on that. But the Tango, who is essentially the main bad guy, can like put her under his spell somehow, and she serves as the centerpiece of this evil like underground sex club that they've got going on.
They call her the goddess.
They do call her the goddess, which is extremely creepy.
In a really stupid outfit.
Yes. And
lower her from the ceiling.
Yeah.
Like some weird cross between an angel descending and a ballet thing.
Yeah, like
and she smooches people, and sometimes they get superpowers, and sometimes they die.
Yeah. By the way, the people with superpowers, I just want to toss this out there, are called euphorians, which is probably the best thing about the show, because it's extremely funny.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And it's like, another thing that is exasperating, which I think really gets the heart of it, is that throughout the show, there are scenes which are, like, individual scenes and things, right, that are really good, like, and actually have a point.
Yeah, there are a couple places where the show comes together for long enough where you see what it's trying to do.
Yeah,
and in normal circumstances, and I think this is kind of where you and I differ, Julian. In normal circumstances, I would give it a little bit of slack for that, but I genuinely think that the simple fact that they're in Speedgrapher brings them down rather than bringing the rest of the show up.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that,
Yeah.
and I broadly speaking, don't really disagree. It's like, it's actually more exasperating is that, oh god, this show has moments where you see that it could have, like, there's some core in there that could have been made into something good. Like, an example, because we already brought up Ballet Guy.
Yes.
Early on in the series, Ballet Guy, who has, like, weird stretchy powers, and is also voiced, I am pretty sure, by the guy who plays Toga in Revolutionary Girl Uma, which...
Yeah, you did point that out. I forgot about that.
Yeah, like, Anyway, he, like, only a couple episodes in, though. Like, he's the first guy who really gets defeated. The way he, like, the protagonist, like, manages to beat him is actually really clever. Like, it is some, as I put it in my notes, JoJo's level strategery. It's actually really fucking good, and also
you can feel free to explain what he does, because I don't think
at one point he gets dragged by Rubberman.
Yes.
Through after this guy has produced smoke, which diffuses the camera flash, so makes it much harder to attack him.
Yeah, that is one of the clever things. One of the very few clever things the Speedgrapher does with Saiga's camera power. He does have to actually A, have film in the camera, and B, be able to focus the lens to use it. So that's like the one thing I will give it some credit for, is that it's like, that is decently clever.
Yeah,
but go on.
So because they're fighting in, like, what I think, like, it is, okay, it's in an office building, gets dragged through one of those glass walls.
Yeah.
So what he does is, when he's about to be, like, strangled by this horrible Stretch Armstrong fetish, pulls a piece of glass out of his arm that got stuck in it when they got dragged through, throws it up into the air, and then uses its reflection when it, drops to blow the guy's head off.
And if that were the level of quality that the show kept up, I would have been comfortable to give it, like, like a tentative, like a thumb sideways, like a, sort of like, one of those shows where, like, if you like garbage,
Yeah, it's like, and, that's fine. Liking garbage is fine. I have enjoyed garbage.
Enjoy like
watching Cat Planet Cuties. I'll say that. That show knows what it.
Yeah, your two podcast hosts here are somebody who likes Cat Planet Cuties and somebody who has defended the first season of the Senran Kagura anime on record. So it's not like we think we're too good for this show.
Jesus Christ, no.
It's just that the show is really bad.
It's really bad.
But as we were saying, there's like a few individual moments where you can see what it's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where the heart of the issue is. Speedgrapher's problem is not that it's campy. There's many anime that are campy. It's a campy medium. It's a pulp medium. It has license to be campy. Um, the problem is, it's actually kind of a complicated problem. Um, the show wants to be diagnostic. It wants to point at things in society and say, this is what's wrong with the world, and this is how we can fix it. The problem with that is that if you're going to do that, you need to do... Well, there's a few things you can do, but the way that Speedgrapher is trying to do it, you need to actually have, like, a really, really tight command of specifically what you're implying with everything you write. And Speedgrapher is incredibly clumsy.
Yeah. Like, it is just... How...
Like, the show is very openly left-leaning, which is great. Mm-hmm. You know, that's fine. The problem is that, when we were watching it, you kept jokingly describing it as based and tank-pilled, which is a thing that I only kind of know what it means, but it seems correct.
Look, this show feels like, the way that I described it when we finally finished it was like, okay... This feels like if you took a 14-year-old who just discovered Mao's Little Red Book and was really into it, and, like, had this kid write a script for a visual novel. Also, this is a very sexually frustrated 14-year-old. And,
that's so mean, but not even remotely wrong.
Super into, militant authoritarian communism.
It's I didn't even
over to a 50-year-old boomer with roughly the same political views.
I didn't even want to get into like the tendential thing. I think it's true, but I actually don't even think that that's specifically the problem. Like, if you want to make a Maoist anime, I'm not gonna stop you. I might even like it. The thing is, like, because it's so incompetent, it just... The thing that it keeps doing, and we both noticed this, it does not allow anything to be subtextual.
No,
there is like... and this is the kind of thing where I can imagine, hypothetically, a kind of person who thinks that is, like, clarity... but that is just so diametrically opposed to how I, engage with art that I just can't...
Yeah.
Like, I just can't really put myself in those shoes. It refuses to let you interpret anything.
Yeah, I screamed, like... Well, okay, I wrote it down, but it is the most heavily, emphasized thing of any of my notes, is just the words, stop saying the subtext.
Yeah, there are scenes up and down the whole show where something will happen, and, there's a very obvious subtext. And if they had just left it at that, it would be fine. And then they will have a character, often Saiga, not always, but often Saiga, basically explain what the thing that just happened meant. It's like, you at that point, why would you not just, like, read theory? Like, there's no... It has zero value as, like, entertainment or art or anything. It's just a guy explaining his political beliefs to you for 12 hours.
In the most... Like, it's also... It feels... Another thing is like... To add on to, additionally, it's like, it is also, I'm going to say this, is like, it specifically feels like it's the flavor of, like there's a certain type of leftist that does not get along with other types of leftist. And it's the kind of person who, like, so there are two kinds of people who, very right-wing or very left-wing, who do this, is uses the terms decadent and degenerate as unironic insults for things.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
This show is the left wing.
The whole show is basically just rich people are evil and they're into freaky sex things. Therefore, freaky sex things are evil. And it's just like, I don't know. Like, I worry we're getting too inside baseball, but there's almost nothing else to talk about. Because the show's actual plot is so... It's such a fucking nothing sandwich.
We can talk about the misogyny.
Oh, we could talk about the misogyny. That's like the other thing.
Talking about the misogyny.
That's the other thing, is that the show's point of view is very, like, this is the most pretentious thing I've ever said, non-intersectional.
Yeah, it's yeah.
Saiga is like a 30-something straight dude, and the show is written from that perspective and nobody else's.
Indeed. It is like...
There's huge parts of the show where you could replace Kagura with a sack of flour, and nothing would change.
Yeah, like, that's a big part of it. Also, like, the female characters, to use some terminology out of, like, pretentious literary theater.
No, go on. We love that stuff.
It would be... It's all virgins, whores, mothers, and crowns. And the mothers are usually virgins or whores, essentially.
Yes.
Or crowns.
Yes. No, you're absolutely correct.
It's just nothing but... It's like, Kagura is your Madonna stereotype, and, keep away the nasty, bad sex.
We haven't even brought up Ginza, who is Saiga's, love interest in huge quotation marks.
Oh boy, Ginza. Ginza starts out kind of interesting.
Yeah, which is the worst part.
And it's like, but like the way that you put it is like, it takes a lot to make me despise a character like Ginza.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm going to put myself on blast here. Do you know how badly you have to fuck up as a show to get me hate a hot lady who totes guns? Like, seriously?
Yeah! I know.
Like, I'm not that hard to pander to if you're going for that kind of thing. But
amazingly, I am better pandered to in that respect by this show.
Oh yeah, we'll get to Sweet Tango's Gang of Four. But
yeah, they're appropriate that they're the Gang of Four, right?
Well, actually, hold on. There's only 3 of them. That name doesn't make any sense. Anyway,
well, no, wait.
There's 4 of them if you count Sweet Tango. We'll get to this later.
Sweet Tango.
But like Ginza.
Then which one of them is Jiang Cheng?
Stop it. Ginza is a cop, which in of itself, that's, I would argue a minor problem all on its own, but that's a whole other topic. Ginza is a cop, and she has this weird, like, codependent relationship with Saiga that is never really explored in detail. Also, she has, like, a literal gun fetish. Like, we see early on that she literally cannot, like, get it working like down there without a firearm.
And it feels like it's a setup for her, like, I just realized it feels like it's a setup for her getting superpowers.
It really does, and she never does. But, like, what I was going to say is, it feels like it's going to become commentary, right? Like, cops love their guns, they can't do anything without them. And it doesn't do that. Over the course of the show, she is just gradually flattened into this yandere stereotype. And that's kind of it. That's kind of as far as her character goes. Like like you have such an easy slam dunk there, and you just don't take it. It's confusing.
It is very confusing. Like, there's also, like, it's also, it just goes to show is, like, so, like, I also recall which is the event in which I totally managed to call something really stupid, like, a couple minutes before it happened.
Oh, yes, go on.
In which, like, I knew, wait, inevitably there's going to be, like, a tragic or dramatic thing where Ginza demands that Saiga take her picture.
Yes.
For, like, non-sex
dramatic
when she
setup.
Realizes
where, yeah.
And then, of course, only a few minutes later, when one of the, bastards of the week,
Yes.
has cornered her as,
Yeah.
awful tattooed serial killer man with his spiders. I'm
realizing this has to sound like just complete word salad to anybody who's not actually seen the show.
And she sounds like, Saiga, take my picture, and I'm like, well, I just expected
yes,
that
no, like, you literally called it maybe like, 2 minutes before it happened at most.
It was like a premature climax. Which is appropriate for this show. That peaks at episode 5 and goes down.
That's not even a joke. 5 is the best episode of the show. Episode 5, and we can get into why. Episode 5 is the one episode that has, or at least feels like it's trying to have, some perspective beyond Saiga's. Because they're on the run from Kagura's mother and her cronies. And they take refuge at a gay bar. Specifically a, what are they called? Like a
drag bar.
Yeah, drag bar. I don't know why I was blanking on that.
Drag queens, and some of them are trans women, actually.
Yeah. And,
like, it's explicitly stated.
Yeah, and, like, the show, I don't know if I'd say it treats them well exactly, but they're not, like, I mean, for one thing, I'm amazed, in hindsight, having seen the rest of the show, that the show doesn't kill them all, because that's kind of the attitude it takes towards most of the other...
The last episode.
Yeah, they're still kicking it in the finale. That's kind of the attitude the show takes towards most of its other characters once it's done with them. But, yeah, there's this really beautiful scene where... Kagura is, like, hanging out backstage with the drag queens and the trans women, and they convince her to go up on stage and sing a song, and because she's been sheltered all her life, the only songs she knows are church hymns. So she sings Amazing Grace in front of a bar crowd, and it's far and away the best scene in the whole show, and it has, like, very little to do with anything else. It feels like the one time where Speedgrapher feels like it's going somewhere.
Yeah, and it's also, and even when it's interrupted, it feels like actually earned in a kind of interesting,
Yeah.
Like, it's like, like it is a little, like, it's almost a little played out, but it's like, it works in context, which is when one of the better weekly protagonist shows up, which is
antagonist, the villain,
antagonist rather. Sorry, words. Well,
Words.
I mean, it is appropriate that like Ginza and Saiga are protagonists, and they're like, well, they're awful people, and it's like, and then you get the flip side of that is that you start to realize that Sweet Tango and his crew.
Oh no, we need to save that. Finish your thought on Diamond Lady first.
To save that one. So like that's when the horny Diamond Eater lady shows up.
Yeah, no. Just to clarify, horny Diamond Eater is literal. She eats diamonds.
Yes,
and
you described her as having strong Paul Wall energy.
Hey, that was a joke just for you.
Yeah, I mean...
Nobody who listens to this podcast knows who Paul Wall is. I'm just joking.
I mean, there's gonna be one.
I'm kidding.
And she actually has... She's, like, horrifying, but then you kind of, like, realize a little later, like, in her little mini-arc that she actually has some pathos.
Yes.
She's had a kind of, like, a crappy...
Like, a horrible life where, they don't really go super far into it, which I must emphasize is good. Leave a little space for your audience to do some thinking.
Yeah.
They don't really go super far into it, but the implication is that she was kind of brought up to see herself just as like an object, and so she sees everything as just objects, which is where this whole like diamond fixation comes from, because diamonds are forever.
And that the only person who she loved who was her husband, basically bankrupted himself desperately trying to appease her material needs.
Yes.
Just because of the fact that she could never articulate properly that he was the one that she actually cared about.
Yeah.
And she basically is now an assassin for them.
Yeah, and
she's just hard. She's become a literally.
Like a diamond. It's
exactly.
Amazing what having just like a millimeter of subtext does for your show. It's insane.
And even then, like, they kind of like explain it more than they need to.
Yeah, no, at the end of that episode, one of Sweet Tango's gangsters, for the first time in what becomes a running problem, as we've gone over, says the subtext out loud. And from that point on, the show is just never good again.
Yeah, it's also, although it is worth noting, and it is in keeping with the Sweet Tango's gang being like the only good characters, the only good main recurring characters, and we'll get to that, is that they are the few people who about themselves basically never say the subtext out loud.
Yes.
Or if they do, it is only in capacities where it, like, one of the weirder things is there is one situation in which he says the subtext out loud, but it's like a thing that the audience already knows, but the character doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's weird for different reasons.
Yeah.
It's just bad storytelling in general.
Yeah. It's, yeah, no, we can get into Sweet Tango's gang in a second here. Before then, we are going to take a short break.
Okay.
Which will be 0 seconds for you guys, but a minute or two for us.
Okay.
And we're back. Okay. So, yeah, we were going to talk about Sweet Tango and his little group, who are, I think it's fair to say, like, far and away the best characters in the show in terms of, like, dimension.
Yeah, it's like they have, and particularly Sweet Tango demonstrates actual interiority in a way that, like, you could argue that Saiga has some amount of interiority, but at the same time, he's just a much less interesting character than they are.
Yeah, no, like, I would say that Saiga has interiority, but isn't an interesting person, to be honest.
Yeah, whereas Sweet Tango, and Sweet Tango is an excellent example of things that are actually kind of great about this show that make the show worse because it reminds you that it could actually be okay.
Yeah, it's like...
like...
The thing with... Yeah, you go first, because I think you like Sweet Tango even more than I do.
Let's explain Sweet Tango. So Sweet Tango is introduced as this the silver-haired guy there in the pimp coat.
Yes. His outfit rules, so this is important.
His outfit does indeed rule. The man, like, has rolled up 10,000 yen bills that he has cigarettes rolled in them, and smokes them, and just, like, casually, while driving his, insane Italian sports car.
Yeah.
And it's like, he seems like the most horrifying money-grubbing asshole, and in a way, like, you sort of realize that he's playing a character, that there is something weirder going on with this guy, and he has motivations that do not align with the people who are around him who think they have power over him.
Yes.
And also that, like, there are little hints dropped here and there early on that he is one of the freaky superpowered people, and that his superpowers are not to be fucked with.
Yes. which that also there's a bunch of parts of Speedgrapher that like would be really cool moments if the show didn't constantly look terrible, and Sweet Tango going like beast mode on people is part of like half of those.
Indeed. Like, the first time, it's like, it is a really cool scene that is hampered by the fact that it's basically not animated. It's like, there is one really cool cut in that. And it's like, so okay, Sweet Tango's powers are horrifying blood powers. He can send his blood out of his own body to produce monstrous wings, which he can fly with, and to, like, straight up impale people, and also create, like, weird homunculi with his own blood that are shaped like him, that at one point he wanted to try to cut Saiga in half with a blood sword.
It's extremely metal, and in a better show, that would be like 90% of what we were talking about.
Yes! It is fucking great. And then, like, when the blood homunculus fails to kill Saiga for various reasons, he sucks it back into his hand. It is sick. And it's just like, and so, like, also he talks on multiple occasions about how I've died already is a recurring thing. And you sort of, and also there's a bunch of weird hints that he and Saiga have some weird connection going way back.
Yes.
That they are not aware of.
It is the one story beat that Speedgrapher almost follows through to a good conclusion.
Almost, yeah.
Almost.
And it's like, so, and like, in the back half of it, you start to get, like, some answers here.
Yes.
Which is basically, like, he's essentially the OG of the weird superpowers.
Yeah.
Like, he, in a way, is... So Kagura, who is the daughter of...
a scientist. We don't really ever learn very much about him, but he's a scientist.
But he was put in charge of some really weird, unethical bioweapon shit.
Yeah.
And tried to expose it and was killed. And because this was essentially covered up, and it was very much secret to begin with, Shinsen, Kagura's mother, has, always resented Kagura as reminding her of this man who she thought abandoned her. And which is part of why she's, on top of just not being a very stable person to begin with, is why she's really abusive. But at the same time, he was also involved in the sort of medical experiments which resulted in Sweet Tango having these powers because of weird genetically engineered virus thing. It's real odd. It's a long story.
The technobabble makes no sense, but that's not really the problem. It's just
it's not. But basically, in order to keep Sweet Tango alive, Sweet Tango was actually a mercenary in one of the places where Saiga ended up.
Yeah.
And brought along his tragic backstory device, which is a music box.
Yeah. I do want to go into that tragic backstory in a bit. Remind me. We'll circle back to that.
And then him playing it saved Saiga's life and resulted in him being stitched back together from bits of other people.
By the way,
including Kagura's dad.
By the way,
had lying around.
Yeah. By the way, if you think that that this show would do something vaguely reminiscent of Frankenstein and not have a character directly mention Frankenstein, you forgot you were watching Speedgrapher.
Yeah, Frankenstein.
Yeah, it's
like, oh my fucking god.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, and basically, so then he winds up, because of his vengeance mission, related to that and the prior things that led up to that, he winds up going back to Japan and taking over a small Yakuza cell.
Yeah.
And the three guys who are in that, who are like the three remotely decent people involved in this, who are all getting like the shit beat out of them or worse by these Yakuza types, wind up essentially in his debt and become his three
musketeers. Yeah.
They're great.
I don't remember the names of the characters. I just remember them as the one who has a prosthetic nose because he has like bloodhound powers. The one who looks like a Go Nagai character, and the big guy. That's how I remember them.
So there's the one who looks like a Go Nagai character, Niyama.
Let's see here.
The guy with the leather nose cozy, as one reviewer notably put it, is Tsujido, who is also just a battle twink, and I love him. I just...
If the show had come out 10 years later, and I know this because it happened to High Rise Invasion, which is also not a good show, although I think it's much better than Speedgrapher, Tsujido would have, like, a Tumblr following.
Yeah, I wonder.
Absolutely.
There are very few results for Speedgrapher on, like, Danboru or whatever, one of which is some pretty decent fan art of Tsujido.
Yeah.
You know, entirely safe for work. But nonetheless, it's just, like, you know, I was so disappointed that there was so little. He's great. I love him. And then Makabe is the big dude.
Yeah.
And he's pretty chill. And the other guy who, again, his name is escaping me because
Genji Nihari.
Nihari.
Yeah.
He is like the most conventionally sort of avaricious and seemingly villainous, but he's also like loyal to a crazy fault.
Yeah.
And it's very endearing.
They are the best characters in the show. They are 4 characters in search of a better series. If somebody out there... I'm putting forward a plea. If somebody out there is, like, one of those people whose whole thing is writing, like, fanfics for obscure series, here you go.
Yeah, like... These characters
here's your challenge. Here's your challenge. Fix Speedgrapher somehow.
Yeah. Oh god. Like, actually, there is stuff you can, and that's the problem, is there's stuff you can work with.
Yeah. I wanna rewind a little bit and get into Sweet Tango's backstory, because that is the point where the show truly, totally lost me. And it sucks doubly so, because it's tied to a character who was otherwise pretty interesting. Sweet Tango's backstory is that he's the son of a corporate mogul. We don't really get a lot of information on the guy, but that's fine. That's all you really need to know. Somehow or another, he gets into debt, and his fortune is taken from him. And Sweet Tango is separated from his sister as they are both sold into basically child slavery. That on its own is already really, really terrible, and I want to grab the person who wrote the script by the lapels or lapels and just go, you didn't need to take it farther than that. But because it's Speedgrapher, they do. So not only is Sweet Tango separated from his sister and sold into child slavery, he is then sexually abused by this weird rich guy, and then he's sold and becomes a child soldier. And it's just like I'm describing it this way, and it doesn't sound like that many things, but it's just too much. This takes up an entire episode. It's this crystallization of this whole problem of it can't let anything just be like a realistic level of terrible. Everything needs to be like as bad as possible. So, everybody has to be like, ultra fucked up. Nobody can just be regular fucked up.
And it's like...
And Sweet Tango was kind of an interesting character in spite of all that, almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's also on top of that is that you could have had even if you still wanted to be like go with like the heaviest possible thing and like the most upsetting, miserable, and kind of edgelordy thing that you could do, you still could have made it like less. Instead of having it all be immediately connected, you can have those things individually happen to a person in this downward spiral.
Yeah, no,
and then have
that's
them,
the other thing.
But the thing is that they're connected by that. On top of that, it's all directly connected, but it's also all blamed on the corporation that was the precursor to the Tenozu group.
Yeah,
which
it's
is
all
why
just
he infiltrates.
It's just too many things. Like the show ties itself into knots, essentially. It's just too many things that don't need to be connected being connected because there's this like bizarre drive to just make everything as terrible as possible and as conspiratorial as possible and like blah.
What was frustrating in turn, as I said, like when that episode happened, was like the thing is that even if you separate it, you could have him sort of connect each of these things back indirectly to the corporation. That'd make a better point.
Yeah, and it would make him an even more interesting character.
And sympathetic.
Yeah, and actually sympathetic instead of what he actually is, which is... I mean, this is another problem that I have with the show. Like, by the end of the series, I was like, I think Sweet Tango's kind of... Like, I mean, he does some terrible things, but of the villains... I think Sweet Tango's kind of the good guy. Like, like his whole plot, spoilers for the last couple episodes here, as if you possibly care, is that he wants to get revenge not just on the group, but the world, and he's going to do that by destroying the Japanese economy. And he has a plan that's actually, like, pretty well thought out, and... It was at that point that I realized, okay, Sweet Tango is like somebody's like weird caricature of like an anarchist, I guess.
And it is, and I pointed out was that what's especially kind of interesting with that is it feels like specifically like a weird caricature of like, so Japan is one of the places where back in like the 18 and early 1900s, there's a specific strain of anarchism which is straight up called nihilism, usually with a capital N. It's, sometimes referred to as negilism or nihilism after the Russian term. It's originally a Russian thing.
Yeah.
And it refers to the idea, in short, not to get too inside baseball with this, but the simple description is basically it shows up a lot in like imperial, very oppressive societies that because of the interconnectedness of things like religion and of the, institutions of government, of even like propriety and morals and ideas of nation states and ideas that all of these things need to be burned to the ground and completely destroyed, and you start from first principles because of an utter moral disgust with the system that you're operating within. And the one of the most famous examples is Fumiko Kaneko, who was a young Japanese woman who was the illegitimate daughter of a very wealthy family who witnessed who was abused by her family and witnessed she was in Korea and her family were colonizers, and she saw how they treated the native Koreans. She went back to Japan. She became a socialist. The socialists disappointed her, and so she was like, I am going to make a point, and if I have to die, I'm going to do it. And it's like, that feels very similar in a lot of
to
ways
what?
to Sweet
Yeah,
Tango's arc.
it's Sweet Tango is that, but cartoonized, because
Yes.
like I mean, the show doesn't sympathize with him. Which is just
It does
like
a
it doesn't
little.
it doesn't make any sense to me. It does very to a very limited extent. It kind of does, but it clearly thinks that his plan is like way too far for some reason, and
Which is
the reason I know that it ultimately wants to portray him as a bad guy is because he also does all this weird shit with Kagura, where he like tries to scheme his way into marrying her because that will let him take over the group. It's complicated and doesn't really matter. But like by the end of the show, Sweet Tango, who is the character that I think makes the best case for his worldview, he wins. Basically.
Yeah.
Like, that's the crazy thing to me, is like he wins, but nothing changes. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, not nothing, but very little seems to change. We don't really see a ton of the world in, like, the finale, which is after a time skip of a few years. But
which I think is in part incompetence on the part of the
it might
writers.
be. It might be. Like, the thing that I just don't understand is you've set up a problem, which is, you know, it's a big problem. It's like, you know, the way that this whole country and arguably the whole world is structured. You have a character break that structure, and like nothing really comes of it. Like the corrupt administration is replaced, presumably. We don't really see it
because most of them get exploded.
Yeah, most of them die. That'll do it.
6 trillion yen in physical assets and like 18 trillion in stocks,
which
literally on fire.
Yeah, which is a lot of money. The K Foundation would be proud. That's our quota of obscure music jokes for the day. Anyway, but
indeed,
it's just like that's kind of like what gets me about this show. It's so self-defeating. It's like it's self-defeating, and also doesn't let you really interpret it in any other way. Like, I think we're supposed to be glad that Sweet Tango's gone, because now, like, Japan can rebuild itself better, but that's what he wanted in the first place, so, like, I don't really understand. It just kind of falls apart at the end, which is impressive considering how little sense it made in the first place.
Also, especially given given there's the whole thing with Ochiai and the critique of reformists.
That's a whole other thing. Yeah,
so there's a group called the White Hawks who are supposed to be who are operating behind the scenes to try to take down the hyper-corrupt government led by the Prime Minister, who is a member of the Roppongi Club.
Yeah.
It turns out, and, there's this really credulous young guy named Joe.
Joe!
Who, oh my god, that whole thing is just, introduce a character, kill him the next episode! It's Ochiai is this, the only non-corrupt member of the, one of the few, but they don't show any others, of the, a ruling party.
Yeah.
He's a former journalist, and he's a campaigner, and he's a literal fighter. He, gets in a boxing match explaining the situation to not Sweet Tango. Sorry, that's the real protagonist. No, to to the fake protagonist. but it turns out he's actually the mole who's been leaking their names because he is an assassin for the Roppongi Club.
It's just
horrifying noise powers.
It's just like the show's idea of what it seems to want is Saiga to force the old administration out by some method, and then it just thinks things will magically get better if there's a new administration. I don't really understand.
Or, I mean, again,
it's like this weird, like... I don't know.
As I said,
I'm at a loss for words.
It feels like a very, very juvenile understanding of, revolutionary communist rhetoric, in that it's trying to critique anarchism in the most edgelordy way possible. It's trying to critique reformism in the most edgelordy way possible. It's just
very if we just kill all the career politicians and put Saiga the brave war journalist in charge, everything will be fine. I mean, he isn't put in charge, so maybe that's just me projecting what I think this show is trying to say.
Yeah.
But I don't know what else, what does it want? It's very incoherent. Which is surprising, considering how, again, I mean, there's not really any room. I literally tried to think, because we finished the show 4 or 5 days ago now, and I spent some time being is there some other way you can read the show that I'm just not thinking of? And I couldn't come up with anything, which maybe that's a failing on my part, right? I mean, that's possible, is we're just missing something, but if we are, I have no idea what.
Yeah, it's it feels like again, you had pointed this out, was that it feels like it forcibly closes itself off to interpretation at every angle.
Which is one of the most infuriating things the show can do, in my opinion.
And it feels like the different angles of interpretation that are available so what weirdly specific subset of Marxism are you trying to explain to us, to mansplain to us at length, very badly?
In the most dry way possible. Which, I do just want to reiterate, if you're a Marxist, that's fine. People are entitled to, think about the world what they want to. But you should want much better representation of your ideas than this.
Yeah.
Because this show is just incompetent. I mean, to take it all the way back to the start of the episode, I have to apologize, because this is the opposite of the point of this podcast.
It really is.
We didn't want to... I wanted to go through the IFC channel stuff because I thought that would be interesting, because people have largely forgotten that block ever even existed. And I rewatched the Witchblade anime a couple years ago, and I thought that was actually pretty good. So I was like, okay, well maybe Speedgrapher will be pretty good too. Apparently not.
Yeah.
I just, you have to believe us when we say that we didn't want to record. We didn't want to spend 11 hours of our lives in preparation for recording 90 minutes of us just trashing on a show nobody even remembers anymore.
Yeah, and I don't even know if the entirety of a podcast of this length, or even one twice this length, could get to every single bone of contention I have.
We could. That's the insane thing. This podcast could be the length of the show itself, and I don't know if we'd get to everything.
Yeah, we could just, do a blow-by-blow
which we, for the record,
every episode.
Which, for the record, we never would, because that would be so bad.
It'd be torture.
That's what Sweet Tango would offer me to see, where my moral line is as far as worth. how much money would I have to be paid to rewatch the show and do a podcast about every episode. It would be a 6 or 7 digit number, I'll tell you that much.
Oh, and there was also, but I mean, it's just like, there's so many like good, I mean, one thing that I can say is there are so many out of context quips, either that you made, I made, or that just come from the show itself.
Yeah, I mean, like, here's the thing. That's fun for you and me, but not for the people listening. The one exception.
Yeah.
There is a billboard that the show...
Oh, yeah.
Through some tortured metaphor, and I really never did figure out where they were trying to take this.
And they dropped it.
Which they drop halfway through the show. They keep cutting to this billboard of a... It's a picture Saiga took originally, which is important somehow, of a girl in an impoverished country smiling. And every single time that a character sees it, they say she's smiling because she's free.
And when he explains it, he explains it to Kagura why is she smiling? Is she smiling because she's free? Her heart's filled with freedom.
Yeah, what they're getting at, and I do understand this much, is that, she's free of, capitalism. But also, that's an incredibly ignorant view of the world.
It's a very privileged, global north. It's like, this is like, it is so peak teenage, not Western, Japanese, but still, in the global north.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to say that because we are also part of the global north, and it does feel wrong for, two white people to be trashing on this, but also...
it is upper middle class tanky at its most...
insufferable.
Just, you don't have real problems, so you assume that people with real problems
actually
have the real answer.
That's the real issue. It has no perspective. There is nothing about the show feels lived in. Yeah, every character, with the exception of Sweet Tango and his gang, and I maintain that that's a fucking accident, just feels like a cardboard cutout. Nothing about the series has any relation to anything real. And I don't mean in a literal sense, because obviously, superpowers don't exist. If they did, that would be sick. But, just, it's a show whose guiding philosophy is nonsense. And, And it's not hard to impress me with this kind of thing. I'm a Symphogear fan. You really don't have to go harder than, it's important for people to try to understand each other. Something like that. That's enough. You really, a basic theme that's existed since, the dawn of culture. It's just something. Not this, weird, bizarro, privileged internet communist shit. It's terrible. I hate this show.
Yeah. And it's also, I do want to add a second belated apology that we...
Sure.
That we did not, just on... At the beginning of the podcast ourselves, just, throw up the largest content warning possible for this entire
God, you're right. I'm gonna have to put that in the description. Yeah, you're correct. God, I should have.
Because I was gonna get into how badly it handles some really, really sensitive stuff. There's definitely stuff where it's trying to talk about child sexual exploitation in Japan.
Yeah, which is a huge actual issue. That it just has nothing. I mean, again, it's the idea, the perspective it has is of somebody who knows that it's real and knows that it's a problem, but doesn't have like the slightest idea as to why or what's to be done about it. So it just everything just feels cartoony, and not in like, you know, obviously like it's literally a cartoon, but like I mean it just feels, everything in the show feels like a farce.
It really does.
It's a 12-hour joke with no punchline.
I mean, like, yeah, especially because they didn't even bring the billboard back. You know,
that would have at least been funny, right?
Yeah,
the billboard, like the billboard is dropped halfway through the show, and I was so dead certain they were going to bring it back for the last episode, and they just didn't.
They brought back They brought back the concept behind the billboard back in a way with the whole thing with Kagura being on the billboard, because we didn't even get to the fucking, you know, MDMA Viagra.
Because it doesn't matter. Like, it's just genuinely not important.
I mean, it is part
like,
of
it's funny.
Plan.
But I mean, like,
but you know,
it's just not that it's not that interesting. It doesn't have any relation to anything.
What is the tagline for Whose Line Is It Anyway again?
I don't know.
Everything's made up and the points don't matter.
Yeah. There you go.
I mean, that's Speedgrapher.
It's like, I mean,
it's Speedgeed. It's Spud Grundle.
Yeah, we came up with, that's the other thing. We came up with like 30 goofy fake names for the show.
Grafter. Stonk Skronkler. Spaghetti Geometry.
Yeah, I came up with Spaghetti Geometry. I'm still pretty proud of that one. Anyway,
Sponge Grappler.
Like, okay, to get to the question that we asked ourselves last time and plan to ask ourselves for every other episode of this podcast, which, by God, I hope this is the worst episode we ever do.
Dear God.
Like, why don't people remember this? But honestly, is that even a question in the case of Speedgrapher? It's obvious, right?
I mean, yes, but... Okay, here's the thing.
Sure.
There are bad shows that people remember, right?
Yeah.
So...
Like what? Just toss out some examples so people know what we're talking about.
Okay, like, what are some good examples of, like...
Like, I immediately thought of Elfen Lied.
Yeah, like, memorably, you know, or, like, shows that are at least divisive.
Yeah.
Like, Elfen Lied is a good example of a deeply divisive show.
Yeah.
Where it's, like... But then again, most of those shows... And that is, like, the thing with Elfen Lied, is, like... Elfen Lied's a Rorschach blot. You watch Elfen Lied, and how you respond to it...
It is open to interpretation. Imagine that.
And like, just how you react to it can say something about you as a person in an interesting way. Yeah. Whereas with Speedgrapher, I am not sure that it allows itself to be so open to interpretation.
I honestly think, like, and if somebody out there does like this show and this description I'm about to give does not apply to you, feel free to explain to me why you like it. I would actually genuinely be interested to know. But I feel like the only way you could possibly like this show is if you agree with its worldview, and because of that, you're willing to overlook its flaws, of which it has many.
I'm sure there are other reasons.
There might be, but I can think of none. Which I feel like that says a lot on its own.
Like, it's worth stating, like, we generally go over, you know, a critical response here. And I think, you know, because that is important to get into context of,
sure.
Like,
yeah, we got like 15 minutes yet, shoot.
So, like, here's the thing, is, like, that most of the critical response to this was bad. Not as bad as our response.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, God, how did IGN refer to it? Oh, yeah, it will... that, you know, this show may put you off sex and violence.
It's, yes, like, a thing that I really cannot hammer home enough is that even if you think we've been talking gibberish for the past 30 minutes or so, the show also just looks extremely bad. Like, it's, like, on a production level, it's terrible. So, you know, I definitely get why somebody would say that. Like, even purely as an entertainment product, it sucks.
And it's like, the only positive review I could find was from the review section for the Sci-Fi Channel back in the day before they changed the spelling of their name.
Mm-hmm.
And that was only for like the first 2 volumes, only for the first couple of episodes, like first third of the show. And it's like, and even then there were some deeply questionable things being said there. Like, I do not want to bash this person, but it's like, I don't understand how you could possibly compare this in any way, even like as the, it deals with quote unquote mature subject matter with fucking like Paranoia Agent was brought up. That's fucking heresy to me. Like, burned at the stake heresy.
It's just like.
But like,
I
Zach
think
Birchie's review is probably one of the most fun that I've seen. Like, because it's like he's talking about how like he's just talking. Even then, he was just talking about like the first DVD of it, even,
mm-hmm.
and he nails so much about this. Like just the lashing that he gives this, like he is describing it, and this is how I describe the first couple episodes, is that it is potentially entertaining. But the thing is, it stops being entertaining.
Like, the thing is, like, about halfway through the show, I was prepared to be like, oh, if you get, like, blitzed with some friends, maybe it would be fun to watch and, like, make fun of. Which is, by the way, in of itself, a thing I don't like saying about a show, because it's extremely disrespectful. So that's already not a good place to be at. By the end of the show, I don't think that even that much is true. I genuinely don't think there is any reason to watch this show for anybody.
I do think there's a certain kind of person who could do exactly what you're saying, because there are things that are arguably worse. Which people do that.
Like, the thing is, most things I can think of that are worse in, like, a generally agreed upon sense, or would be if anybody knew about this show or cared about it, they're short. Like, Mars of Destruction is, like what, 14 minutes long or something?
Yeah, it's literally, like, it is literally an extended series of cutscenes.
Like, things...
That one is...
Yeah, things like that are brief. Yeah, and I have a problem... Before...
Garzy's wing!
Yeah.
Garzy's fucking wing!
Like,
that's
before I watched this show, a thing that I had watched just on my own time, basically out of curiosity, was Blast of Tempest, which, through bizarre coincidence, also has a prominent female lead with long brown hair who actually looks rather similar to Kagura, I'm now noticing, so I'm probably cursed, or it could just be that it's a very common character design. Anyway, a thing I noticed about that show is that if a show is not that good and it's 12 episodes, that's a lot easier to forgive than if it's the same quality but twice the length. Like, Speedgrapher is 24 episodes long and it feels like 240.
It does feel significantly longer than it actually is. Like I said then, it's like not nearly to that degree, was that I said that it felt
I'm exaggerating.
Like about the length of something like the original Full Metal Alchemist, which is twice.
It does feel twice as long as it actually is.
It is like, and then but with only a scintilla of the fucking quality.
So,
like, people fight about whether or not they actually like the original adaptation of Full Metal Alchemist because fucking anime fans. But I personally really like it. But
even if you absolutely hate it, it's nowhere near this bad.
Oh, nowhere near. Like, although there is one connection, is the closest thing I can compare this to in a lot of respects is Angel Cop. which was written by Sho fucking Aikawa, who, after he turned his career around and presumably his life around, wound up writing the 2003 Full Metal Alchemist series. And he also wrote a bunch of other actually very well-respected stuff. Martian's successor, Nadesco. Vampire Princess.
I don't want to get too into the production minutiae on this one, because honestly, if I was associated with this series, I would not be proud of that fact.
Oh God.
If people remember the director, it is not for this. It's for the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Which, I haven't seen it recently, but I watched it as a kid, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
He should be proud of that legacy and not this.
It's like... Can we get into that a little bit? Like, digging
we have a couple minutes left, but sure, yeah.
So I was just thinking, because, like... I might as well do something with these fucking notes. All these fucking notes. I have 7 pages of notes on this fucking show. It's like... the director, right, as you said, at around the same time he did this, he did the first Strike Witches OVA, which... Even then, what you will about fucking Strike Witches.
Strike Witches is divisive, but I can't imagine it's anywhere near this bad.
No, I have never heard anyone, aside from, being put off by it for what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Speak of it in the terms that I just... And then he went on to do Nabari no O, which I haven't heard bad things about. And then, mostly does Beyblade now.
Yeah, and we're not going to go over the individual, every single person, but what we looked into is the same story. Yeah. They did perfectly, anywhere from perfectly good to actually, really good stuff, both before and after Speedgrapher, and Speedgrapher is, a weird anomaly in, everybody's production history.
Yeah,
I have no idea what happened behind the scenes to make this show the way it is. There's a story there, which we'll probably never hear, but there's a story there. I know there is.
Especially because, the thing is that, while I would chalk up, there's... I'll get to this very quickly, is, after explaining this. So the series composition guy, guy running the scripts, Shin Yoshida, right?
Yeah.
He's done every season of Yu-Gi-Oh! From the, first season that isn't, the prototype season, the one that was...
Oh, yeah, no, we're not counting season 0 here,
we're not counting 0. So he went on to do Zone of the Enders, which I've heard very little about, but generally positive. And around the same time he was doing Speedgrapher, he did Karas with Tatsunoko, which is this dark, transforming hero series, which I've heard nothing but nice things about.
Which we might eventually cover on this show.
Yeah, and then,
and hopefully have more positive things to say about.
Yeah, and then, moved on to stuff like Sacred 7 and Hypnosis.
Yeah.
Which aren't it's
Hip Mike is that show has a die-hard fan base.
Yeah, exactly.
That show is people who love that show really love that show.
And he also wrote scripts for Technoeyes, which is a fantastic
It's just I don't know if it was something going on with the company or if it was just time and space are distorted in Lordran. I have no idea. Sometimes things just go wrong and you get this. As for why nobody remembers it, which is the question we always ask ourselves, obviously nobody remembers this. It fucking sucks.
And it's the other reason I think is because
it's bad and it's too long. Yeah. It's just if you want a show like this from around this time period, watch Black Lagoon, which also has quite a few problems, but is at least looks good and also is a lot more interesting.
Also, just if you want edgy edge boy shows, Kimono Zume, Technoeyes,
There's
Like,
so many other things. Like,
if you want really left-wing shows, Kaiba
yeah,
exists. Kaiba's
Kaiba's
fantastic.
great. Yeah, no, but like seriously,
God.
like nobody has any reason to watch this. I don't think.
Even as like absolute dog shit, just utterly fucking
Yeah.
awful shows that you want to get hammered to scream.
You
at.
can find something better. You see,
again,
Big Order. Big Order's funny.
Yeah, Big Order, or even if you want like the worst of the worst, as I said, something like fucking Angel Cop. At least it's short.
It's only
At
like
least
an
it
hour
is-
long. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a couple of episodes, and it's basically this condensed to that. And it
Yeah.
contains the line, "If this is justice, then I'm a banana," which
Yeah.
is so fucking great.
Angel Cop, I will say, okay, the one thing I will give this over Angel Cop is that Angel Cop is apparently, like, extremely anti-Semitic, which this is
Yes.
not, at least not explicitly.
Yeah, it's like, so this show occasionally veers onto the edge of Nosbol territory.
Yeah, I will
just-
I'm gonna give you a silver star right in the center.
But
Not
it doesn't go
anti-Semitic.
but it doesn't go full on to the weird,
It's-
paranoid Japanese ultra-nationalist shit that
It's-
Angel Cop does.
yeah.
Which is also like a cop fetish show. Which
Yeah.
this one isn't really. It's got Ginza and that's it. And even she's like,
again, like
she's supposed to be an asshole, I
we've run out of things to say. We're just repeating ourselves at this point.
God.
I just have to apologize for a third time because this is like
soundtrack's
literally
okay.
the soundtrack's okay. Yes, I will give it that. The soundtrack
And
is fine.
And the original Japanese opening has, appropriate to its weird misogyny, Duran Duran's "Girls on Film," which
Apparently,
is a
yeah,
legitimately banging song.
It's a good
objectively
song.
so. Okay, not objectively.
But
no
like,
such thing as
yeah,
objective
no,
quality, but
we've
You
said all we
understand.
can say. Yeah, like again, I do have to apologize because this is not the point of this podcast. We're not trying to be like the angry video game nerd, and we're not trying to be like, oh, this anime is shit about like everything that's even slightly subpar. Like
even James Rolfe doesn't do that anymore.
I honestly don't know very much about the guy. Anyway, but just like, don't watch Speedgrapher.
No, don't watch Speedgrapher.
Watch.
I had like a fucking, I went into like, knockoff Roger Ebert mode, flipping out about
Speedgrapher. What you said will form the text description for this episode.
Yeah.
So you don't need to read it out loud. People can look at it and read that. It's so bad. Don't watch it. Next month we are watching Windy Tales. Production IG's Windy Tales, which we have already seen the first 2 episodes of. I haven't formed any detailed thoughts of it yet. I already like it so.
I have already seen it, and it
so
is
much more than this.
Yeah.
Watch Windy Tales. Watch Windy Tales, and then you can listen to our episode next month on Windy Tales, and you can be like, "Wow, I really appreciate Windy Tales." Don't watch Speedgrapher. Speedgrapher is the devil. I hate this show so much.
Like,
we're done. Shreddy, we're done. Julian,
Jesus
we're done.
Christ, yes. We are done in so many senses.
I look forward to never thinking about this show again.
But it'll haunt my fucking dreams.
We're smiling because we are free. Good night, everybody.
Good night.